Hey everyone, Merry Christmas Eve. I know you're all probably getting ready for tomorrow, but while you're prepping the feast and getting those stockings hung, we're going to dive into some pretty wild weather that just slammed Queensland, Australia.
Wild is right.
And you know we love a good deep dive. So we've got reports from ABC News Australia, of course, but then we also have Fiji Village,
Fiji Village.
Oregon Live, even a report out of Texas.
That's right.
So it's a real mix, but I think it's a mix that kind of gets you thinking about how connected our planet's weather really is.
And how quickly things can change, you know? You're thinking about holiday roasts and then suddenly, bam, you're swept up in this global whirlwind of floods and storms. It's fascinating.
I know, it really is. So let's zoom in on Queensland. Imagine you live in North Queensland. You're used to, you get rain there, you get some downpours every now and again, but nothing like what just hit.
Yeah.
We're talking 286 millimeters of rain in just 3 hours.
Wow.
In Tulakia, which is north of Townsville. And that's almost a foot of rain. Like, I'd be grabbing a snorkel, not a Santa hat.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's really what makes this event so unusual. Even for a region that, sees its fair share of rain, the Bureau of Meteorology experts are saying this level of localized intensity is highly unusual.
So, it's not just, your average rain shower. This is intense, localized, it's a downpour. So what's causing this sudden, deluge?
Well, it's a bit of a perfect storm scenario, quite literally. You've got a southeasterly change that's sweeping through, and then you've got a trough that's adding to the mix, and there's even a chance of a tropical low developing.
Oh, wow.
So all of these factors are kind of swirling together to create this really intense rainfall.
Yeah. So this perfect storm idea, how often do those sorts of conditions actually all line up like that?
That's a good question. It's something that climatologists are studying very closely. It's difficult to, link any single event directly to broader trends. But we do know that a warming climate can lead to more extreme weather patterns. And that includes these really intense, localized downpours.
So this downpour that we're seeing in Queensland, is that maybe like a glimpse into what we might be seeing more of in the future?
It's certainly possible.
And with all this rain coming down in such a short period, what kind of impact are we talking about on the ground?
Well, the most immediate concern, of course, is flash flooding, which, as you know, can be incredibly dangerous, even life-threatening. And we're already seeing its impact on major routes like the Bruce Highway, which is actually closed both north and south of Townsville due to flooding.
You read about road closures, and it's like, oh, okay, roads closed. But then you come across a story like Guy Bonds. She's a rideshare driver in Cairns, and she was totally caught off guard by the flooding at Freshwater Creek.
Yeah.
And it really brings home the impact of these events. It's like, it's not just a headline anymore. It's people's lives.
It's real, yeah. And in Guy's case, there's this added layer of concern because there was a recent crocodile sighting in the area.
Oh, no.
So talk about unexpected dangers during a flood.
Oh, my gosh. So you're dodging floodwaters and keeping an eye out for crocs.
Exactly. It's wild.
It's crazy. And it makes you realize that these events can create just a ripple effect of just unexpected consequences.
They do.
Speaking of ripples, this latest rainfall is hitting Queensland just as they're starting to recover from. They had storms and flash flooding earlier in the week that caused damage in the Western Downs and the South Burnett region.
Oh, wow. So this is just adding to an already difficult situation.
I know. It's like a double whammy. And it really makes you think about how they're going to cope with, such frequent, intense rainfall.
And especially with, the potential for more extreme weather on the horizon.
Exactly. And it's not just coping with the water itself. There's a watch and act warning for parts of Townsville, urging residents to, prepare to leave their homes, especially near the Bull River and Blue Water Creek.
Yeah, those warnings are in place for a reason. And there are also moderate flood warnings for the Bull and Houghton River catchments.
Oh, okay. So we need to break down what these warnings mean.
Yeah.
Right? Because understanding them can be the difference between, staying safe and putting yourself at risk.
Absolutely.
So can you, for a listener, can you explain the difference between a flood watch, a flood warning, and a flash flood warning?
Yeah, so a flood watch is essentially a heads up that, conditions are favorable for flooding. So it's like a signal to start making preparations,
Yeah, it's like a yellow flag. Be alert. Things could change quickly.
Exactly.
Okay. What about a flood warning?
So a flood warning is more serious. It means that flooding is either happening or it's imminent. So it's time to take action to protect yourself, and your property.
Okay, so that's a red flag. Time to move to higher ground if you're in a vulnerable area.
Right.
And then you've got the flash flood warning.
Right. So that's the most urgent. Flash floods involve a really rapid and dangerous rise in water levels,
Hmm.
often with very little warning.
Oh, wow.
So if you hear a flash flood warning, you need to seek higher ground immediately.
Okay, so no matter what type of warning is issued, the bottom line is, pay attention, heed the official advice, and never ever attempt to drive through floodwater.
Oh, absolutely. You never know how deep it is or what might be hidden beneath the surface. It's just not worth the risk.
It's like playing a dangerous game of roulette with Mother Nature. Yeah, don't do it. So this intense rainfall in Queensland got us thinking, are there similar events happening elsewhere?
It's so interesting because as we were, kind of looking into this whole Queensland situation, reports started coming in about flash flooding in parts of Texas.
Texas.
Yeah, specifically Fort Worth. They got over 4 inches of rain in just a few hours.
Wow, that's a lot of rain in a short time.
It is, and it sounds a lot like what's happening in Queensland, doesn't it?
It does.
And then on the other side of the world, Fiji Village reported that Fiji is also under a flash flood warning as we speak. Heavy rain is impacting the islands and causing similar concerns about flooding and potential damage.
So we're seeing these intense rainfall events kind of popping up all over the globe.
We are.
It's almost like a domino effect, each event echoing the others.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It really does. So are these events like connected in some way, or are they just like a coincidence?
That's a good question. It's a complex question, and there's no easy answer. While each event has its own unique set of local factors, like you were saying, the southeastern change and the trough in Queensland, there are also these larger-scale climate patterns at play. Like, for instance, we're currently in a La Nina phase,
La Nina, okay.
which typically brings wetter conditions to parts of Australia and the Pacific Islands.
So this La Nina, it could be like a contributing factor to the heavy rainfall that we're seeing in both Queensland and Fiji.
Exactly. La Nina influences, global weather patterns, and its effects can be felt in very different parts of the world. So while the immediate causes of flooding might vary from place to place, these larger climate patterns can create conditions that are more favorable for these intense rainfall events.
So it's like a giant puzzle where each event is a piece, and by putting all those pieces together, we start to see this bigger picture.
That's a great analogy.
Mm.
And that bigger picture is one of, a changing climate with warmer temperatures leading to more moisture in the atmosphere and ultimately more intense rainfall events.
So warmer air, more moisture, bigger downpours. That's a pretty simple equation with some really complex consequences.
Absolutely. And those consequences can be felt in a lot of different ways. So, for example, in Queensland, the heavy rainfall isn't just causing, those immediate problems like the flooding and the road closures, but it also has the potential to, disrupt agriculture. Right. Impact tourism, and even, contribute to things like supply chain issues.
It's not just, the inconvenience of not being able to get around or having a flooded basement. This is like long-term economic and social impacts we're talking about here.
Exactly. And those impacts can be especially significant in regions like, Queensland, where agriculture and tourism play such a vital role in the economy.
This is a lot. This is a bit overwhelming, honestly. Are we just at the mercy of these increasingly frequent and intense rainfall events, or is there something we can do to prepare for and mitigate the impacts of all this?
It's a natural question to ask, and the good news is there are things we can do, both individually and collectively.
Okay, so let's start with the individual level. What can people do in their own lives to make a difference?
Well, I think even those small changes can add up. So reducing our carbon footprint by, for example, choosing more sustainable transportation options, conserving energy at home, and just being mindful of our consumption habits are all steps in the right direction.
Those are all things, we hear those things a lot, but it's easy to feel like, what I do, one person, it's not going to make that much of a difference.
I understand that feeling, but imagine, millions of people making those same small changes. It creates a ripple effect, right?
Mhm.
It's a collective shift towards a more sustainable way of life.
So it's not just about individual responsibility, it's about creating a collective movement. Okay. What about on a larger scale? What needs to happen at the governmental or societal level to really address these challenges?
Well, we need policies that, that promote renewable energy, that invest in climate resilient infrastructure, and that prioritize sustainable development practices.
Those are some big goals. It sounds like a massive undertaking.
It is. But it's also essential if we want to protect our planet and ensure a sustainable future for generations to come. And it's not just about, governments and large organizations taking action. Communities can play a really crucial role in preparing for and responding to these events as well.
Okay, what does that look like practically?
So things like developing community-based disaster preparedness plans, investing in early warning systems, creating more resilient infrastructure at the local level.
So it sounds like it's really like a multifaceted approach.
It is.
It's individuals, communities, and governments all working together.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility.
As we're discussing all of this, I can't help but think back to those personal stories we were talking about earlier. Geeted Bon in Cairns dealing with the floods and the crocodile sightings and Kylie McPhee being stuck at the Kalen pub because of the road closures. It brings home the human impact of these events in a way that statistics and scientific reports sometimes can't.
It's true. Those stories remind us that these aren't just abstract concepts. These are real events that are impacting real people's lives in very tangible ways.
And as these intense rainfall events become more frequent and potentially more severe, those impacts are only going to become more widespread.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought, especially as we're sitting here, on Christmas Eve, a time when many people are focused on, joy and celebration. But I also think it's important to acknowledge the challenges that we face and to use that awareness as a catalyst for action.
It's about, finding that balance between, acknowledging the seriousness of the situation and not losing sight of hope and the possibility of a brighter, more sustainable future.
Exactly. And that's where, knowledge and understanding come in. The more we know about these events, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions, both in our own lives and as a society.
Knowledge is power, right?
It is.
But it's also about more than just knowing the facts. It's about using that knowledge to inspire action and create positive change.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and wait for the next flood or storm to hit. We need to be proactive in preparing for and mitigating the impacts of these events. And that starts with understanding the science, recognizing the interconnectedness of our planet's systems, and working together to create a more resilient and sustainable future.
This has been a really insightful conversation, but I gotta admit, it's also a little heavy for Christmas Eve. I'm wondering, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, if you have any final thoughts to share.
Yeah, it is a lot to think about, especially today of all days. But I think what's so interesting to me is that we're even having this conversation, pulling in these reports from Queensland, Texas, Fiji, all in one place. It speaks to how connected we are globally, even when we're talking about these localized weather events.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. We have this incredible access to information now and to different perspectives in a way that just wasn't possible. I mean, even a generation ago. So it allows us to see these events not as these isolated incidents, but as pieces of a much larger puzzle, right? Yeah. And that puzzle, when you start putting the pieces together, reveals this picture of a planet that's undergoing some pretty significant changes that are impacting, all of us.
Yeah, it's not just an environmental issue anymore.
Right.
It's economic, it's social, it's even political. The ripple effects of these extreme weather events, they touch every aspect of our lives.
It's true. And thinking back to those personal stories we talked about, Geed navigating those floods and crocodiles and Kylie's holiday plans getting washed out, it brings home the reality that, this isn't just some abstract concept we're talking about. These are real people dealing with the very real consequences of a changing climate.
I agree. I think their experiences, while unfortunate, they serve as these powerful reminders of why it's so crucial for us to understand these events and to prepare for them as best we can.
So where do we go from here? What do we do with all this knowledge? Honestly, it can feel a bit daunting.
It can.
It's true. The scale of the challenge can feel really overwhelming, but I think the first step is just acknowledging that it is a challenge and one that requires, a collective response.
So we start by just facing the reality of the situation head on.
Exactly. And then we can start asking ourselves, both individually and as a society, what role can we play in addressing it? That might mean making changes in our own lives or supporting policies that promote sustainability or even just, having these conversations, raising awareness and sparking further exploration.
I like that, sparking further exploration.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that this deep dive, this isn't like the end of the conversation. This is like a starting point,
It is.
for more learning, for more critical thinking, and hopefully more action.
Absolutely. And while the challenges are real and the work ahead is significant, there's also, I think, this sense of hope in knowing that we're not alone in this, right? There are people all over the world working towards solutions, innovating, collaborating, advocating for a more sustainable future. It's like this global network of change makers all contributing in their own ways.
Yeah.
And every action, every conversation, every bit of knowledge shared, it all like adds to that momentum.
It does. And that's what makes me optimistic. Despite the daunting nature of these issues, I think the human capacity for innovation and resilience and collaboration gives me hope that we can navigate these challenges and create a future where we live in greater harmony with our planet.
Well said. Well said. And on that hopeful note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this Christmas Eve deep dive. It's
Yeah.
certainly given us a lot to ponder, hasn't it?
It has. But hopefully it's also left our listeners with a sense of empowerment,
Hmm.
knowing that they too have a role to play in shaping a more sustainable future.
Yeah. A perfect thought to carry with us into the holiday season and beyond. Thanks for joining us on this journey. And to our listener, wherever you are in the world, we wish you a safe and joyful and reflective holiday season.
And a happy new year filled with purpose and progress.